Okay, 10A, lab 19, what page is it? 45? Page 45. We're going to look at some of the kingdoms of living things, right? Remember those?
Animal kingdom?
We're looking at the animal kingdom this time. Yes, we are. Okay. So we're going to start off with our classification methods. These two guys are some of our famous historical scientists that you should remember way back from Module 1. All right, Aristotle over here, the Greek, came up with the first way to classify things more than 2,000 years ago. And he classified them based on characteristics of those creatures, of those living things. He kind of put them in different groups. Well, then this guy came along. His name is Carolus Linnaeus, and he wanted to make it very systematic. And furthermore, he also chose to name everything in its Latin name, and that would be advantageous because no matter where you were studying these, scientists will study Latin. And so with Latin, everybody we would only need the one language. They wouldn't have to be translated into thousands of different languages. All right, so y'all remember this probably from earlier science classes. Kings play chess on fine glass sets, and that represents something. It's called a mnemonic. Mnemonic, that's right. Kingdom, phylum, class, order, family, genus, species. Is that written in your book?
Are we going to remember that?
Mm-hmm. Yes, you will have to remember that. Is it in your book written down for you?
I forgot my book.
Oh, I have your book.
Oh.
You left it here last time. So I've got it. Here, let me get it for you.
Oh. I'm like, I didn't take it out at home. I was like,
Let's see. Yeah, it doesn't have it on there at all, does it? Okay. All right. But the next thing will be on there. So we're going to be looking at the 5 kingdoms. Now, these 5 kingdoms were set up by Carolus Linnaeus. He was a believer. He believed that God created everything. And due to that fact, and the fact that it's quite old, it's not as old as the Greek system there are many institutions of higher learning, we call those colleges and universities, who don't like using Carolus Linnaeus's work. Okay, they feel like it's antiquated, and they've changed things. So there's a really good chance that wherever you end up at college, they will not be holding to the 5 kingdom system. We are at this point holding to the 5 kingdom system. I'm happy with it. I know that the general science book is changing next year, and it may be out. So they may have gone to a new system. And I'll explain to you when we get to there where they want to change a few things. In fact, I think the most common one now is a 3 kingdom system, just 3, they're called domains, and they're kind of strange. They have almost everything lumped into one, all animals and plants lumped into one. And then the 2 other ones are 2 different types of bacteria. I think it's kind of strange.
Speaking of changing things, I heard they're going to take down, because they think the years are going by so fast, they're going to take down the minute to 59 seconds. Which is pretty dumb.
They're going to reduce a minute from 60 seconds to 59 seconds. Now, where did you hear this?
No.
And who are the they there? Because I'm thinking they're not very smart. So
Yeah.
59 is an odd number. Yeah, it would mess everything up. So
It would.
that would not be smart. So what are our 5 kingdoms? The first one, easy. It's called Kingdom Animalia. What do you think's in Kingdom Animalia? Animals. So you're going to write that in your first box there at the top. At the very top, there's 5 boxes. It's okay with me if you write animal instead of the Latin term animalia. Okay, so but it's obvious it's animalia, which is animals. Next comes plantae, which is plants. So all the plants go in that group. Next group is called Kingdom Fungi. So fungi, so a fungus, fungi or fungi, or fungi, some people say. That's the plural of fungus. Those 3 you may have recognized as living things. Can you think of some more? There's 2 more. Anybody read ahead? Is that my next? That's my favorite. Well, I'm not gonna say my favorite. Of course, I like the other kingdoms, but Modera is what my expertise is in. My degree is in microbiology. Therefore, I spent a lot of time learning about kingdom Monera. That's the bacteria. And Protista. Monera is bacteria. But I want that written down, kingdom Monera. Don't write bacteria for that one. I'm fine with animals, plants, fungus, Monera, and then Protista. All right, so we're going to look at several of these today. Maybe we're going to touch on all of them. Do we have those 5 boxes filled in there?
Wait, what is Protista?
Protista, we'll see what they are. They're a type of living thing that are called protists in 2 major groups. That's what I think they should break up groups. That's the Protista, in my opinion, because they're so different from each other. All right, so one way to sort living things is the type of cell they're made up of. Okay, so y'all just finished drawing cells, right? And we made our cells last week of a typical animal cell and a typical plant cell. Remember that other typical cell we drew last week? It was a typical bacteria cell, remember? And I told you something special about it. And what I told you was its DNA is just floating around on the inside of it. Right there, it's not being held in anything. So that type of cell is called a prokaryotic, meaning primitive kernel. So a prokaryotic cell is one that has no membrane-bound organelles. There's nothing in there that's bound by a little membranes. And there's not even a nucleus in there. The DNA is floating around. There are ribosomes floating around inside there. Then we have the eukaryotic, which means true kernel. EU means true. It has distinct membrane-bound organelles. I still have students to this day up in high school who say that a eukaryotic cell has a nucleus. That means it has a nucleus. So I will accept that answer because the nucleus is a membrane-bound organelle. But there's a bunch of other membrane-bound organelles inside our animal cells and plant cells, right? Things like mitochondria and endoplasmic reticulum, ribosomes, Golgi apparatus, lysosomes, all those things that we learned about last week. All right, so a prokaryotic cell by definition then is much smaller than a eukaryotic cell. Both of these cells would be considered microscopic. You need a microscope to see them. There are a few single cells that you can see with your eye. An egg would be an example of it. A chicken's egg is an example of a eukaryotic cell. The biggest eukaryotic cell is an ostrich egg, you know. Prokaryotic cells are very tiny, very, very tiny. And not only do you need a microscope to see them, you need a really high-powered microscope, at least 1000x to be able to see them. You can maybe see a blob or something on however high we can get before 1,000, 400 or so. All right, look at all those parts on the eukaryotic cell. We know those, right? We know what all those different membrane-bound organelles are. You know, we have all those parts like we put in our models last week. Okay, so this little chart is in your book, and you're just going to write something down and the type of cell they are. So the first kingdom we're looking at is Monera. I will tell you we're going to go from Monera up, which is considered from the least complex to the most complex. That's arguable in my book because I think that you should look at some of the bacteria out there. They're very complex, but we would definitely agree that a little single-celled microorganism, a germ growing in your gut, is not as complex as your human body, right? That I can see to for sure. So the Monera is the kingdom that includes bacteria, which should be written down for you. They absorb their food by just getting it through their membrane, their outer membrane, and they are going to be prokaryotic cells. So I believe you can just write a P in there for prokaryotic cells. Our next group, the Protista, are going to be broken into 2 very large groups. They're actually called subkingdoms, subkingdom algae and subkingdom protozoan. The algae are plant-like and the protozoans are animal-like. Some are producers, like the algae, for instance. Some are consumers, like most protozoans. They are E for eukaryotic cells. Eukaryotic cells. Fungi come next. We have mushrooms and yeasts in that group. Most of them are saprophytes or decomposers. They are eukaryotics, so E. Plantae includes all of our green plants. All plants are green except for this one crazy weird one that I'll show. Maybe that's my biology kids. I'll show that too. It's white. It turns out it's a white plant. It doesn't do photosynthesis. They produce their own food through photosynthesis. They, of course, are eukaryotic cells. In animals, any animal, you can have an example there. They consume food, and they are eukaryotic cells. They're made up multicellular eukaryotic cellular organisms. The Monera tend to be, they are single-celled. They live alone. They subsist alone. They do live in giant colonies of other bacteria, but they don't depend on each other. The Protista can be single-celled, yeast in particular, but the other ones, most of them are, the algae right here are going to be multicellular. Protozoans are single-celled as well. The rest of them are all multicellular. That means they're made up of a bunch of cells put together. All right, that wasn't much to fill in for y'all. Okay, we're going to get started then on Kingdom Monera and talk a little bit about these guys. Okay, we'll be getting to that pathogens here. Okay, so all of these are prokaryotic. I have a particular affinity toward the Kingdom Monera because of the bacteria I studied so much in college. Most people think that bacteria are bad, bad, bad. They're horrible, they're terrible, awful, gross. Oh, no, no, no. The vast majority of bacteria are either beneficial for you, they're good for you, they're helping you be healthy, or they don't harm you at all. And they're doing something else that's useful. There are a few bad actors out there, sadly, those we call pathogens, and we'll get to those in just a minute. So some of them will use flagella for movement. They have these little projections coming off them that are like a tail. It whips them around. They actually have motility. They can move around. So if you have a pathogenic bacteria that can move around, then you can see how that could spread pretty easily, especially if it's swimming through a water source. Many of the old diseases of long ago were spread through nasty water before we realized you need to clean your water before you drink it. Now we clean our water before we drink it. All the water coming out of the sink has been treated from somewhere in our city. They treat the water for us. If you drink rainwater, you may want to be careful and filter that before you drink it. Even if it seems like fresh rainwater, there might be something in there that could be pathogenic. I'm going to cover a few of those here at the end and gross y'all out just a little bit. They eat by absorption. They come up near their food source and they can actually just absorb the nutrients from it. If they're pathogenic, they invade your cell and absorb your nutrients. They're unicellular. They live as single cells like these guys right here. There are two large groups, well, actually two groups. One large called the Eubacteria, meaning true bacteria, and the weirdos called the Archaebacteria. They live in very strange locations, like in the caldera of a volcano and in ice and stuff like that. John Mark.
This is awesome. How they survive is they just absorb another guy. Like, hey, you. Yeah.
Yeah, they do. They just absorb stuff. And oftentimes what they're absorbing is nutrients. Like, for instance, we have bacteria living in our gut right now, and it's very important. They're very important for our gut. It helps us digest our food. And our food gets down there, and as we're digesting food, they absorb the stuff they need. So they absorb some of our food too. Yeah, so we're absorbing it, they're absorbing it. It's all good. All right, let's talk about some pathogens. You're supposed to fill this in a little blank right there. Pathogen's an organism that causes disease. Now, there are more organisms out there besides bacteria that cause disease. For instance, viruses. The coronavirus is one example. The coronavirus is not in Kingdom Monera. That's because a coronavirus is not alive. Okay, it's not a living thing. It's like a little machine that comes and invades you. It doesn't have the ability to reproduce. If it can't reproduce, it cannot be alive, correct? Remember our 4 criteria of life, right? They have to be able to reproduce. Okay, so here are some of our nasty little pathogens out there that will invade. Has anybody ever had strep throat? Yeah, that's when they invade the back of your throat right there and they take over. And with strep throat in particular, it causes your white cells to show up and it causes pus to form. You probably noticed white spots.
I had that a couple days ago because I couldn't, it wouldn't go away and it just hurt all the time.
Are you okay today?
Yeah, it hurt. It's still better.
Okay. It may not have been strep throat. Could have been something else. Okay. Most bacteria are good. All right? Most bacteria are not pathogenic. Here are those guys living in our gut, and they are helping take care of us. In fact, there's actually one thing that some of the bacteria in our gut do for us. They manufacture a vitamin called vitamin K1. And without vitamin K1, we can't clot our blood very effectively. So we need bacteria in our gut. And when a baby is brand new baby is born, they had nothing in their mouth to eat, correct, before they were born. So therefore their gut is completely sterile. They have no bacteria in their gut. And therefore it's very important for those first several days that little babies don't have a bleed. They don't get cut. Because guess what? They can't clot very well because they don't have bacteria making K1 in their gut to help them clot. That's why For circumcisions for boys, they wait 8 days. It turns out it takes about 8 days for your gut to be populated by bacteria,
For boys?
which you get for all humans.
Oh.
And you get that from the outside world, from mom feeding you, from bottle feeding you, from all that. You get that. Yes.
Is it a thing where like your blood doesn't clot, you just keep bleeding?
There's a disease
Is
called
I-
hemophilia.
I have a cousin that happened to him.
Is it a boy?
Mhm.
Yeah, it's called an X-linked gene, and it's almost always boys. But he's probably got some good medication that helps him handle that. In the old days, they couldn't handle that, and those people didn't live very long. Yeah, so famous. There's some famous hemophiliacs
So
out
like
there.
if you cut yourself, it just would never stop.
It would eventually stop, but it would bleed so much that you might bleed too much. Yeah, and it depends how bad of a, sometimes the bleed is inside and you don't even know you have the bleed, and that's when it gets really dangerous. So an internal, and you don't know how to stop it. Yeah, that kind of thing. Eliana, did you have a question?
I was just gonna say that like avocados.
They look like avocados. Dancing. Avocados are good for you. Yeah, that's good. All right, so yeah, they're happy in there, helping make our guts nice and healthy. I will say that I'm glad that finally the world has caught up with the microbiologists of the world, say me, to say how important our microbiome is, and that's why a lot of people, you probably know people who are taking something called a probiotic. You know some people? I take a probiotic. I take a pill every day that's got a bunch, like thousands and thousands of bacteria in the pill, and I take it. I swallow it every day. That's what a probiotic is. It's good for you. Okay, the archaebacteria are the weirdos. Okay, these are the strange ones. It's not nearly as big a group as the eubacteria, but they live in extreme environments. For instance, the thermoacidophiles live near sulfur hot springs, where you would think that things couldn't live. I mean, we're talking really hot water, boiling water in some cases. Typically, if you want to get rid of bacteria, two best ways: you can boil them and kill them, or you can remove all the water from them. If they don't have any water, they'll die. Yes.
That's what they do sometimes, like when my nephew was like a baby, when they would get like either if it was like pacifiers,
Oh, yeah.
the bottles they'll put it in.
Oh yeah, we boil them, right? Yeah, and then some time goes by, and we're like, yeah, whatever. Yeah. The methanogens, they live in scalding volcanic deep sea vents, and they're methanogens because they're releasing a gas called methane, so they're stinky. So a lot of these weirdos are stinky too. The halophiles, or the salt lovers, they live in very, very salty solutions, like the Dead Sea and the Great Salt Lake. The Great Salt Lake in America, in Utah, is not as salty as the Dead Sea, and so more things can actually live in the Great Salt Lake. Anybody been to the Great Salt Lake?
No.
It's kind of smelly, really. People don't really swim in it, But the Dead Sea is called the Dead Sea because nothing else lives there, right? But there are a few bacteria, halophiles, that can actually live even in the Dead Sea. John Mark.
My mom and sister has been to the Dead Sea.
I would like to go. Did they float in it? They float in the water?
They just couldn't go down.
They couldn't get in the water? Oh, they couldn't get under the water. Yeah, you can't. It's so salty you float like, you can sit up straight in the water. Yeah, so I'd like to go. You can't, you try to go under, yeah.
Yeah.
You keep buoying up. Josh.
Nothing lives in Dead Sea, like no animals?
Well, no animals. Yeah, that's why it's called the Dead Sea. It's too salty.
Not crocodiles?
Nothing.
Saltwater?
No fish, no nothing. But a few of these bacteria can survive in there. Yeah. All right, so here are some of those places. That's the Dead Sea to the right here. The reason why it's dead is because a river flows into it. It's called the Jordan River. You probably heard of it. Jordan River flows into it, but nothing flows out of it. So everything kind of sits there. In fact, they say that this is the belly button of the world. They say this is the lowest spot on the planet that's not under the sea. Under the sea, of course, we have deeper places, but on the earth itself, this is the lowest spot. And everything sort of drains to that little spot and just stays there. And then the water evaporates because it's a desert area, and the salt stays in because the salt doesn't evaporate. Josh.
I don't know if it's me, but it looks like a captain kneeling.
This one? Okay,
Yeah.
I see that.
Wait.
Yeah,
I just see a person.
I see the knee coming out there, yeah.
Godzilla.
Godzilla.
I see a
On the left, this is some of those nasty places where some of the not the halophiles, but the acidophiles live, and they're producing kind of smelly things. But it doesn't always have to be nasty. I will say it's almost always smelly. But look how beautiful this is.
Oh, that's Yellowstone, right?
That is Yellowstone. And I know somebody's here been to Yellowstone, right? John, you been to Yellowstone? You been to Yellowstone? Have you seen this?
Yes.
Okay, so these are people walking. So this is huge. Was it smelly?
Yes, very.
Okay, and you can't really see it as well as you can see it here. I I mean, we're looking from above and you can see that beautiful blue and green and yellow. And this, when you're walking next to it, you're like, oh yeah, there's that bloom. You're like, ooh. Yeah. So, but there are bacteria living. That's what's making the colors, is the bacteria that are living in there. So very cool. I don't know the name of it. What's the name of it? Do you know? Probably some like devil's hole or something like that. You can see some steam coming up over here because that's another thing right there. It's like a part, like what's that called? When a geyser comes up, so it's like a hot spring or a hot. And it looks like it's really hot, but I tell you, there's some thermophiles living in there. Some bacteria can live in there, the weird ones. Okay, so the eubacteria, the vast majority of bacteria, the ones I studied, because the other ones we didn't really, I studied in the books, but never really got to see them personally. I got to see these personally by growing them. They are the ones we know to be pathogens are the eubacteria. And that's because those other weird ones aren't living in your body, right? They're living in weird salty places, so they're not making anybody sick because they're not living in our bodies. Okay, it turns out that the eubacteria come in three main shapes. They're either a circle shape, which is called a coccus, or a cocci. You've probably heard of staphylococcus or a streptococcus. That's one, if you have a bunch of them, because they're living in a colony. We have something called staphylococci and streptococci. I remember not too long ago, one of the final words in the spelling bee contest was staphylococci. And the kid had to spell that, and they did. Yes?
What about coccidia?
Coccidia, it's got the same shape, but it's not, coccidia is not a bacterium. Coccidia is a worm, and it's in the kingdom of Protista. Bacillus is also known as rod-shaped. It looks like a little bitty rod, I guess. And then Spirillum. Spirillum are kind of cool because they're shaped in a corkscrew, and if they just turn their body, it makes them move. So they're motile. They can move a lot. And there are also a lot of the pathogens are Spirillum shaped. All right, when they grow together, like two cocci together, diplococci, streptococci, they grow in a long line. Staphylococci, they grow in a sheet. So when you look at it on the microscope, you will see a sheet of these little circles. You say, oh, it's staph. It's staphylococci. And then the bacilli can do that as well, but they're not as famous as the staph and the strep are. So strep throat is this guy right here growing in you. You have strep in your throat right now. It's just not a pathogenic strain of strep. When I was in high school, I had a project I had to do, which is what got me interested in microbiology in the first place. And that was, I went to all my classmates and I swabbed everybody's throats. And then I started to grow to see what was growing in everybody's throats. I promise you right now, if we swabbed your mouth, you would have bacteria growing in it. There's bacteria in your mouth. There's more bacteria in your mouth growing than there is in a dog's mouth.
Ew.
It turns out a human bite is more dangerous than a dog bite bacteria-wise. Not kidding. Because we have so much bacteria. And if this bacteria, which is normal and good in your mouth, it's keeping you from having cavities, it's keeping you from having diseases in your mouth. It's helping to start the digestive process. All of that's very, very important right there. And then our throat has bacteria that will help kill stuff that's trying to get into our body that's bad. They'll be attacking them. So as I swabbed all of my classmates' throat, including my own, I grew them out. We all had all sorts of stuff growing. But I happened to notice more strep growing in students who were the type that got sick more frequently. You know, people just get sick easier. Some people, I rarely get sick. I'm not going to say never, because here it is, January. And if I do get sick, it's in January. And so far, I'm okay. I do have a little bit of an allergy thing, whatever that cedar or whatever's in the air right now bothers me a little bit. But I thought that was interesting. So my theory was that perhaps those people who had a higher load of strep maybe had less of ability to fight it when the bad one came in. You know, so that bad one would take over and produce a strep throat. Yes?
So if you ever kiss your dog's like, ew, your saliva's gross.
I know, the dog should be saying gross to you, right? Exactly, right. So here we are looking under a microscope. Those are probably, I'm going to say that magnification is probably about 2,000 or 3,000 times what they really are. So we can see this is diplococci. Notice how they kind of have a funny look right there. If they grow kind of strange like that, it might be a particular type of, it's a type of disease that grows in twos. Then our rod shape, these are really classic. You've probably heard one of these, like you've heard of strep and staph. The most famous of the rod shaped ones is called E. coli or Escherichia coli. Escherichia coli is growing right now in your gut, and it's important. It's good. We need it in our gut. We don't want it in our water source. We don't want to drink somebody else's E. coli. And we don't want E. coli from cows. That would be gross.
Ew.
Yeah, because that's different strains, and that one could make us sick. Then we have our spiral or spirillum shaped one right here. Like I said, a lot of pathogenic one comes in there, comes in that. Okay, they're very small. Some cause disease. They're pathogenic. Most are not pathogenic. It takes about 20 minutes for one bacterium to split into two. In 24 hours, you can have millions. So take a look at this picture on the side right over here. This is actually a blood smear of a person who is infected, and the rod-shaped purple things are the bacteria. Okay, so this person's blood is infected with those rod-shaped bacteria. This person's in trouble. All right, because you can have an infection in your throat, strep throat, and you'll be okay. But if that strep gets into your bloodstream, it's called septicemia, and it'll make you really sick. It can cause a high fever, and your whole body turns red. Has it ever happened to you, where your body turns? You look like you've been sunburned all over your body.
I have been sunburned all over my body.
Well, your body's red from the outside, but this is red from the inside. It's called scarlet fever. These other purple things in here, I want you to take a look at these right here. See these round things? These kind of bigger round things. Looks like it has some headphones inside. Those are white blood cells.
Oh.
All right, so these white blood cells are called segmented neutrophils. This is another kind of a white blood cell right here called a macrophage, and a macrophage eats up bacteria.
Looks like
So
they're being
these
attacked.
guys are in there to attack those bacteria that are there. Okay, so if I do a blood smear and I see lots and lots and lots of white blood cells, I'll know that that patient has a bacterial infection because the white cells are going to respond to bacteria. If I'm looking at a slide and I see gigantic bacteria in there, then I'm like, get that patient on an antibiotic tube suite right now, quick. This person's sick, or dog, or whatever we're looking at. Josh.
Dog.
I'm about to say, like before you said they're attacking, I'm saying like the wrong thing, like they're attacking the cells.
True,
Overall.
but actually it's the other way around. White blood cells. Hey, were we watching that video last week about all the different kinds of cells? Remember that one that gobbled it up and y'all said, oh gosh, it ate it? That was a white blood cell eating up a bacterium. That's what white blood cells are for. Yeah, so our white blood cells are fabulous. It's just if we have a really high white blood cell count, it means we probably have a bacterial infection, which you might need help. And the help would come in the form of an antibiotic. All right, so I'm going to show you a couple of tools that microbiologists use. When you're in biology 1, you'll get to use these tools, okay? Especially if you take it with me, because I actually have those tools because I'm a microbiologist.
Do we do it now?
No.
Oh.
We're not going to do it now because we had to use the open flame and all that kind of stuff. So we're avoiding that. We're going to look at water today. Yeah. So what this is called an inoculation loop. And what you do for your inoculation loop is you take it, there's a little tiny loop on the end. You take it and you put it over the flame like that. And the reason is if I'm going to try to see so let's say you come in and you have a sore throat, okay? And I'm going to take a swab of your throat, and then I put that swab into a little test tube that's like got soup in it. It's basically soup. And it starts to grow because guess what? That stuff growing in your throat really likes the soup too. So it starts to grow in the soup, and I see it starts getting cloudy, which reminds me, in your book and in your lab book, you're going to see 2 at-home projects to do. And what it's going to be trying to grow stuff in tubes, with their little glasses or whatever. I will tell you that is not required, but it's extra credit that you can do. What will happen is as the bacteria starts to grow in the soup, so just picture a tube full of chicken broth. Okay, chicken broth. It's clear, right? But if I put your swab in there, after a couple of days or 24 hours, about 24 hours, it'll be all cloudy in there. Guess why? Because the bacteria are growing by eating the soup. So then I take the inoculation loop and put it into the soup, and I'm going to do what comes next. I don't put that inoculation loop into your throat, is what I'm trying to tell you. Olivia.
So wait, soup feeds our
Yeah,
we're
they love
sick
soup.
and we eat.
They
So
love
it's
soup.
Not helping
No.
us?
Soup is making us better as far as making us healthy, this kind of thing. But when you take the bacteria, what they're living on is the nutrients in your cells. So yeah, but you don't, your other choice is not to eat anything. That makes you weak. And if you're weak, they really take you over.
So sorry, I saw like the plants in the back. Are they starting to grow?
Nothing in these plants. I tried to throw these away last week and somebody pulled them out of the trash.
Oh.
Nobody else has anything growing? I sent them home with a younger class, not the big cups, smaller cups, and they grew like crazy. So I
What?
have no idea. Same seeds.
And maybe the big cups.
I
Yeah,
doubt
like
it.
this.
What would the big cups have to do
My
with it?
terrarium is just not
I knew that plant gave me a bad look.
All right, so now what I do is now that I have my tube of soup growing your bacteria in it, I have to make sure my loop that I'm using is sterile. Otherwise, there might be bacteria on my loop. And so if I try to find out what bacteria is growing in your throat, I might have a contamination from my loop. Do you get it? So I have to sterilize it. So then I put it into my soup, and it actually collects in there, just like when you put a bubble wand into bubbles, it stays in there, right? And then I take that, and I streak it on a plate, and I have a little, we've used Petri dishes before, and I have little glass ones. I'll pull them out at lab time, and I'll show them to you. And we streak them on another type of nutrient media. Okay, so the soup was the nutrient for the bacteria in the tube, and now I have something else that's solid in these plates. It's called agar. All right, it's like Jello. It's Jello in there. Okay, it's like chicken soup Jello inside there. And so you streak it on there in such a way that you try to get colonies. So you streak it one time, then you flame the loop, and then you streak it a second time, and you flame the loop, and you pull out of that, and the third time. And our idea here is to get, this is all growing bacteria on there. It's all bacteria growing on that Jello plate in my Petri dish. And my goal is to try to get little individual colonies so I can see what they look like. Here's another one right there. So you see I started here, and I went here, and then I got all these here are individual colonies of bacteria of one type of bacteria growing. And that's when I have success. Now I can go in here and I can take just that little thing right there, and I can test that and figure out what kind of bacteria is growing in your throat.
You did
Make
that?
the colonies fight.
The colonies are going to war. Yes, Josh.
Did you do that?
No, I didn't do that one. Nope. But I did tons of those in college. And furthermore, the agars, this is called nutrient agar. And in college, what we use, one of the most popular ones, and this gross you out maybe, it's called blood agar. Because bacteria, guess what they love to eat?
Blood.
Your blood. Yeah, so they'd be red. There's literally blood in there. And they would grow on that. Yeah, but they would do things, and you could see them growing on there, and sometimes they would have a little halo around it, which means they were killing those red blood cells, and that told you something about the bacterium. All right, so if I have a bunch growing here, now I don't have, some of those might be individual colonies. When you take biology, which is a 9th grade course, this is 7th grade, right?
Mm-hmm.
So 8th grade is physical, and then comes biology, yay.
What's wrong with it?
It's just some boring stuff. Well, it's going to change. They're going to change now. It's just a whole lot about weather, and I'm just
I
not
love
very-
weather.
Do you love weather? We spent
Yes.
weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks on weather, and I was just
Yay.
about to, be bored.
Tornadoes
to
and
death.
hurricanes. baby.
Wow.
All right, so in Biology 1, though, you'll take home an agar plate with you and a swab, and so students go and they swab something, anything, like a doorknob, or their dog's mouth, or the sink, or their microwave. That was a big one. One of my students took her phone out of her phone case and swabbed the back of her phone, and the stuff that started growing on that agar plate after that, it was scary. So she decided to clean her phone and her phone case after that. So stuff will start to grow in a field like this. So when you swab something like that, you're not trying for isolated colonies. You're just looking for things to grow, and you'll find something like this. And then when we find that one thing that we believe is the cause of your throat, okay, we will take that one thing and grow it by itself on a new agar plate, a big one about this big. Most of them are only this big, about this big, and we're going to see if there's a medication that'll take care of it. So you may have gone to the doctor, and they say, yeah, I think you have strep throat. They have that SNAP test now. They can say, yeah, that test positive for strep throat. And they may send you home with a medication, and then 2 days later they call and say, we need a new medication. The one I sent home with you is not working. And you're like, how do you know? You say, because I'll show you why how I know that. Because they have something like this. Okay, so this is bacteria growing on this big plate, which is about this big. And each one of these little discs right here is impregnated with medication, with a drug. All right, and you can see that the yellowish color here is the bacteria growing. And see that halo around the white disc? That means the bacteria is dead right there. Okay, so what did the stuff in that disc do? It killed the bacteria. So that's really a good drug. So if you were going to look at this plate and decide what drug do you want your patient to have, you're going to take the one with the biggest halo. Y'all think it's this one in the top, sort of?
Yeah.
That's pretty big, but look at the one right down here. Look, it's very clear, like it really killed the stuff, right? Now, do you want to send this one?
No.
No. So the one that has very little halo around it, over here to the left, What if that's the one I sent home with you?
Oh god.
And then 2 days later, it takes 24 hours for it to grow in the soup and all that. Then it takes 24 more hours to grow on here. And I look and I say, oh goodness, I sent that home with my patient. I have to call them up and say, stop taking that one. I got a new one at the pharmacy. You're going to take that one or that one. Okay? And sometimes you might have a patient that might be allergic to one of the medications and they have to go with the second best
Look
one.
at the one on the right bottom corner.
Here? Yeah, it's doing not much at all, right? There's nothing going on right there. But see that nice tight, this one right here has a nice tight circle around it. Why this one's a little fuzzy, and this one's really fuzzy. So this is just absolute death, the one that's got a real tight deal like that.
How's one under that?
Say again?
One under it?
Right here, yeah, real tight. So any of those would work. And I will tell you that medication, any medication you take, anything at all, an aspirin, a Tylenol, any of those things has a toxicity load with it, okay? Anything we take. I mean, anything you put in your mouth has a toxicity load to it, food, okay, chocolate. But when you take a medication like this, there's going to be a certain amount of toxicity associated with that might make you feel sick. Furthermore, an antibiotic means anti-life, against life. It's going to kill all your bacteria. So remember I told you all that good bacteria in your gut? It's going to kill that bacteria too. And that's not good, is it? We want that bacteria. That's good for us. That good bacteria is good for us. So sometimes the doctor will tell you, take this antibiotic and also eat yogurt. Have they ever told you to eat yogurt? Guess what's in yogurt? Good bacteria. The good stuff. They're going to replace it. So every time you're eating eating yogurt, you're eating a whole bunch of bacteria. Also, does anybody drink kefir? How about kombucha?
No.
Kombucha, you like it? I don't like it. I don't like yogurt. That's that sour taste I'm not really crazy about. But kombucha and kefir, something called kefir, kimchi is like a sauerkraut kind of a thing. Sauerkraut, real sauerkraut. All of that has bacteria in it, and it's all good for you. So fermented foods have bacteria, and they're good for you. So remember, bacteria is mostly good. All right, that's my thing here. All right, but what about keeping bacteria from making us sick? If we don't want to be sick, the way we're going to keep it out of us, keeping out of our food, refrigeration, cold. They don't like cold. That's why when you go to a hospital and it's very cold in there, it's because they're trying to discourage bacterial growth. They do that on purpose. Salt. Only the weirdos grow in the salt, right? So salt will kill bacteria. It kills them. Pickling, that's really salt and vinegar. So acidic and salt. Dehydrating is probably the best way. If you've ever been on a camping trip and you had dehydrated fruit or something like that, it keeps for a long time. Because if there's no water in there, the bacteria can't grow. They're useless without water. And then canning, you know what canning does? It takes all the air away. And if a bacteria doesn't have any air, then it can't breathe and it dies. So that's a way, so canning them. For you, keeping bacteria out of you, antibiotics, of course, are the medications. If you have an infection, I would avoid an antibiotic if I can. We can sometimes heal ourselves and not have to worry about taking an antibiotic. I think antibiotics should be the last case. You know, when you had a blood smear like that one we saw earlier, yeah, they need an antibiotic, okay? You need to rely on it for that. But also hand washing. Y'all may or may not know this. I despise hand sanitizer. I despise it.
Why?
I think it's one of the worst things ever. Also, antibacterial soaps. Because you're killing everything on your hands. All the good bacteria. There's good bacteria on your hands. Your skin is teeming with bacteria. It's all over. We need it. We need that bacteria there. So when we put all that alcohol stuff on there, it just kills everything and it blows it away. Just wash your hands with soap and water. You're good. That's it. That's all you need. That's all you need. Do we communicate germs from one person to another? If I go and then I touch, yeah, you bet. Sure. That's true. So washing hands is good. But using hand sanitizer, I understand right now with the whole panic and everything. It's interesting. Hand sanitizers kill bacteria. They don't necessarily kill viruses. So, a little bit useless there. Okay, good bacteria. We produce vitamin K1, which helps our blood to clot. We mentioned that earlier. Oh, what about cheese and yogurt? We need bacteria to make them. You don't have cheese without bacteria. The process of it. Some of them you can see, like in blue cheese. Blue cheese, that blue thing growing in there that's actually fungi in there. Decomposing dead things is also important for bacteria.
You already what?
I said that's why I don't.
Okay, let's talk about some bad bacteria.
Ew.
Okay.
That's kind of ugly.
Yeah, they're pretty nasty. Some of them are really, really bad. Fortunately, because they're bacteria, for most of these guys, we do have a drug that combats them. We have an antibiotic that kills them. Viruses, we don't have anything that kills a virus because a virus isn't alive. That's why viruses are so insidious. That's why this corona thing is so awful. We don't have any drugs to kill it.
Unless
All
that
we can do
COVID
is to
shot.
make you healthier so it doesn't bother you. What was that, Josh?
Unless we got that COVID shot.
Well, that's a vaccine, so that's approaching it from a different way. Oh yeah, really quickly, some of these salmonella is a food poisoning that makes you really, really sick. There's one called botulism from Clostridium botulinum, which will kill you. It will kill you. It's the deadliest natural toxin known to man. It comes from a bacteria that just squeezes it out of its cells. Yeah. Even when it's dead, it can still kill you because its toxin will remain. Also, you heard of tetanus? Tetanus is caused by Clostridium tetani, and then gas gangrene by Clostridium perfringens. Yes, John.
I have not got my tetanus shot yet, so.
Ooh. Did you poke yourself with a old rusty nail?
I don't
No,
get
but
tetanus
I've been close to.
Oh, yeah, that reminds me of one time once while my brother was mowing the lawn, he ran over a rusty nail and it just shot at him
Oh, no.
into his leg.
Oh.
And one time he just dropped a magnet by
Okay.
his leg and it just kind of resisted to it.
Did he? It was still in his leg.
And he's like, wait. Yeah, but no.
Oh.
They actually got it out.
Okay.
So, yeah.
All right, Kingdom Protista. Most are microscopic. They're all eukaryotes. There are two groups: Protozoa and algae. Question?
I have had the end of a toothpick going at the bottom of my foot.
Yeah, and so hopefully it wasn't a used toothpick. In other words, it hadn't been
It
here.
wasn't,
Okay.
but it
Because
was.
here we got bacteria, and then that's bad.
Poison.
Yeah. Okay, protozoan. Like I say, we have two groups. We have algae and protozoa. The protozoa are animal-like, but remember, they're not animals because they're not in Kingdom Animalia. They're in Kingdom Protista. So here they are. They look kind of like this. They're unicellular. They're eukaryotic. They have all those membrane-bound organelles. They're classified by their means of locomotion. They can move around with a flagellum. They can move around with little cilia that beat on them and move them around like that. They look like this. You'll find those in pond water. Some of them are green. Volvox is green. It performs photosynthesis. See, and that's actually Volvox. Some people put Volvox in algae. I prefer to put them in algae group because they're green. These are more plant-like. They have no specialized structures like roots and stems. Is that? I have it underlined. Are you supposed to fill that in?
Yes.
Roots and stems. They don't move on their own. They're mostly in water. They're floating in water. You've seen them floating on ponds, things like this. I have some in the water I brought today. They perform photosynthesis. In fact, the vast majority, like 80% of the oxygen we have in our air come from algae. Okay, so people say we're cutting down the rainforest. We're not going to have enough air to breathe. That's not exactly true. I still don't think we should cut down rainforests, but most of our oxygen is coming from the oceans. We need to keep the oceans healthy. Diatoms, kelp, red algae. Diatoms are real cool looking because they have cell walls made of glass. Yeah, they're like little glass walls, and when you crush them up, they become diatomaceous earth. You've probably heard of diatomaceous earth. Yeah, it's real scratchy. It's real abrasive. You feed it to rats, and it cuts up their gut, and they die. Yeah, that's how we use rat. That's how rat poison works. So they're responsible for photosynthesis than more of any kind of algae out there. There's tons and tons of them out there, and they're really cool looking. That's a really close-up picture of one. Kelp is actually a multicellular version of an algae, seaweed. We call it seaweed. But they don't have specialized structures. They don't have roots. They don't have leaves. They look like they have leaves. They look like they have stems. They even look like they have roots, but they don't. But they can have underwater forests that grow up to 100 feet tall. And instead of a root, they have something called a holdfast, which they hold fast to the bottom so they don't get floating away. They have something called a stipe instead of a stem, and something called a blade instead of a leaf. Question?
I've heard if you ever sink to the bottom and you're like near a cat forest, you can plant this top.
Sure, it's like a tree. Right. You'll pull it down when you do that, but it should be able to. You should be floating a little bit because you are buoyant somewhat. Red algae, it absorbs. It can be deeper in the ocean because it absorbs light that's not as close to the surface, so lower depths. It can live at lower depths. Here you can see some out here.
Whoa.
Sometimes there'll be a bloom called a red tide, and if you've ever been to the coast at a red tide, you know don't get in that water. There's all sorts of spores and stuff. It'll make you feel sick.
What?
And you don't want to harvest any food out of the ocean when there's a red tide going on. It happens down the Texas coast, and I've never been there fortunately, but my kids went down one weekend and they said there was a red tide. They said just standing at the beach made them want to sneeze, and it was awful. And you certainly don't get in the water.
Wait, but what is it?
It is like our red algae that goes and it blooms. It's like it's bloomed and put out a bunch of spores.
Does it only go like?
It only happens now and then. Yeah, it happens rarely, in fact. It's like an overgrowth of it. Just happens at certain times. Typically, if the water's very warm, it's conducive to blooming like that. Now, these are some of the protozoans called dinoflagellates, and they have a little flagellum around here like this. And when you stir them up in the water, they glow.
Yes.
Yeah.
I want to go. Yes.
It's called bioluminescence, and it really does happen. You can see it crashing on the beach here. That's glowing right there. So keep in mind when you do this and you see all that glowing, it's little critters. It's little protozoans in the water swimming with you.
Or like whenever you.
Here, splashing in the water. Yeah, step. This is somebody throwing some stones in the water or something.
Are they okay?
They're not pathogenic. Yeah, they don't hurt you. You probably don't want to drink them. You know, so it's probably it's salt water. You're not gonna drink that anyway. But if you had water like pond water with it, you would want to filter that water. Yeah. Protista need moisture. They're mostly found in ponds, streams, lakes, in some really wet soils and rivers. Okay, we're gonna run out. We're not gonna be able to look at our pond water today.
Oh.
This is microscopic action of an amoeba eating a protozoan. It's swallowing it. I think it's a classroom of children. They just realized they've been engulfed. They're trying to get out. They won't. They're just going to be dissolved and eaten.
This is awesome.
Yeah. Now they're gone. They're digested now. Okay, some protista are pathogenic. We have certain diseases right here. One of them is called malaria. Malaria, it actually invades your cells, your blood cells, and makes you anemic. This is called Giardia. You may have heard of Giardia. It grows in even freshwater sources like mountain rivers. So if you've ever been camping in the mountains, you come to a river that's beautiful, fresh, clear water. It may have Giardia growing in it. And it's interesting. We used to culture these. If we had dogs that came in with the symptoms of Giardia, which is massive diarrhea, and we would test that feces. And if I found these in there, they looked, and used to call them monkey face. And you can see them; they look just like that. So, yeah, I could find those in there and say, oh, yeah, they have Giardia. And we give them a medication and we kill the Giardia. There they are. I would see that in a slide right there like that. Here's an amoeba. Oh, okay, I have to tell you about the acanthamoeba. So sometimes the amoebas are living if you go swimming in the lake, you're swimming with the amoebas. That's just all there is to it, okay? And it's not a problem, but if they get in the wrong place. Okay, so this is the way I say it. Like, have you ever been on one of those party boats and they have a slide on the back of it? And if you slide off of it and it dumps you in the water and that water goes straight up your nose, okay? Yeah, if there's an amoeba in there, it might go up into your brain. So, now, are the chances good? No, the chances are not good that that's going to happen. But I will say, when you go down this slide, hold your nose, okay? You just do not want that water going all the way up your nose. There was a child, a 12-year-old, who died of an amoeba in the brain swimming in Lake LBJ, I think 3 or 4 years ago. Yeah.
My uncle lives in Canyon Lake.
Okay.
And so his house, it's pretty much like it's just his house, and then you walk in the backyard, and then like after a while you can walk to the very edge and you can jump off into the lake, because it's like a little I guess you would say cliff.
Dock.
Like,
Oh, a cliff. Okay.
Like it's kind of high, but we like always go and jump in there.
So just hold your nose when you do that. That's all I'm saying. Because Canyon Lake in particular is fairly shallow, and therefore it's warm often. In the summer it's warm. John?
We went to Slide Rock in Arizona, and there's like a maybe 10 to 20 foot ledge, and then the water is like 10 feet deep, so
Oh,
you
no.
can jump off.
Did you do it?
Yeah.
That's not deep enough for me.
Fun.
Or it's too tall. Josh?
There's one of my brother's friends. They were at some kind of pond or hiking, I guess, and they found like a cliff and a little water spot. So they jumped off, but it was like really shallow and they didn't know because they didn't check before they jumped. So they jumped down and broke his leg.
Well, he's lucky he only broke his leg, okay? So those are people diving head first, they break their neck, and they can never walk again. So always check the water before you jump in it. Okay, but let's get back to this amoeba. This particular amoeba is called the acanthamoeba. All right, I have a friend, this is a true story, friend of mine. Her son, high schooler, wore contact lenses. Anybody here wear contact lenses?
Zoe.
Okay, so, you know, they get fitted to your eye because our eyes are shaped, you know, and they fit. So one day he's putting in his contact lens and he says, Mom, my contact lens doesn't fit. And she said, well, that's weird. And so wear your glasses today. So he wore his glasses that day. So she, smart enough to do so, called the eye doctor, and the eye doctor said, oh, that's not right. Let's get it taken care of. Well, he had an amoeba growing in his eye. An acanthamoeba it's called. And if it doesn't get treated, prepare yourselves for the next picture.
I'm kind of scared.
Oh God!
That's disgusting.
Awesome.
Whoa.
Wait,
Yes.
you may not see.
No, right. At this point, this has gone so far that person cannot see at this point. They would have to have surgical procedure to remove the lens and the cornea of the eye and replace it, which we do have the ability to, not the cornea actually. Cornea you have to get from a dead person who donates it to you.
Did that happen to him?
No, this kid, since my friend called the doctor, they said, bring him in, and they looked in there and they said, okay, he's got this amoeba, and we don't even have the ability to treat it here. You have to go to Houston. They had to go to Houston to a specialist, and he got treatments in his eyes for a long time, like several months. So he had to wear his glasses for several months until he killed that amoeba. It took a while to kill him. All right, y'all, we don't have time for our lab today. I'll just show you. This is some of what you would see in the pond water. My pond water is probably not this good anyway, so I'll just leave this going and watch it for a few minutes, and then you can start to head out. We have about 2 minutes.
I hate amoebas.
Yeah, they're pretty nasty.
Look, it's goodness.
Yeah. Oh yes! I tried myself.
So this is the kind of stuff you'll see swimming around in your pond water with you when you're swimming in your pond. So you might want to reconsider swimming in a pond. This is why we put chemicals in our pool, so our pools don't have these critters swimming around in them. But it's pretty cool to see the different life that's in there. These all these creatures, you know, they're all God's creation too, right? They all have a role to play in our world. So we praise God for that. All right, next week we'll do 10B. No quiz next week.
Yay.
Next time I'll try. We took a long time on our quiz today. Next time I'll try to get our lab done.
Here's your pen.
Thank you very much.